presentation is on the subject of waste refrigerants and will be given by Elizabeth Bagley from Project Drawdown. Elizabeth speaks and teaches about sustainability solutions, and we'll be looking closely at one of the project opportunities within the Drawdown program. The management of waste refrigerants is an important action idea for all Rotarians to be involved with. It incorporates activities to reduce, reuse, recycle, and particularly prevent the release of these very problematic greenhouse gases. Before joining Project Drawdown, Elizabeth directed sustainability efforts at the California Academy of Sciences and designed the science content for video games and books. She's an experienced environmental educator and taught at middle and high school science from K-12 all the way to graduate students. Elizabeth serves on the board of the American Camp Association, and she's an active member of the Green Scientific Advisory Group of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And she was an inaugural fellow for the Sustainability in Science Museums Fellowship at Arizona State University. Thank you for being with us, Elizabeth. I understand that you're in California today, and we look forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. It is a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm just going to get some slides started, and can we see them okay? All right, I'm gonna start right here, and I wanna start today by inviting all of you to answer a question. I'd like you to think about what comes to mind when you think of climate change and global warming. So go ahead and put your answer in the chat box, and I'm going to see what comes in while I'm talking. All right, Michael, what kind of things are you seeing on your end? We'll make this a little interactive. We'll get people moving. What kinds of things are people saying? Oh gosh, I'm seeing a lot of things come through. What do you see, Michael, on your end? Oh, I think you're muted, Michael. I'm going to have you, if you don't mind unmuting. Thank you so much. All right. So we've got a lot of things coming in through the chat box.
Coal-fired power plants, extinction, lots of scary stuff.
Okay, Michael, we're going to stop right there because I think that's probably where we're going to net out with this answer to the question. And you know what? We are not alone, folks. There was a recent study where 14,000 people around the world were asked this exact same question, and 44% of those people talked about outcomes. They talked about really scary stuff. They talked about things like changing weather and melting ice caps. Another 18% of those people talked about causes. They talked about things like the burning of fossil fuels, like coal, oil, and natural gas. And here's where I really want to focus today. Only 3% of those 14,000 people from around the world talked about solutions. So if you weren't thinking about solutions when I asked that question, you are far from alone. And I really want to pose this as an opportunity to start a conversation about climate solutions so that we can work together to put solutions into place in our homes, in our Rotary clubs, in our communities, and our businesses. Because as all of you are Rotarians, you are, and you're very aware, you are people of action. You are people of solutions. So my hope is that after this conversation, solutions will actually be one of the very first things that come to mind when you think about climate change and global warming. So you're already doing really important work. And I hope that today you'll find other solutions that you might be able to put into action. But you might be wondering, what in the world are the solutions? I'm just thinking about really sad, scary stuff. Okay, here we go. Here is an unreadable, very colorful diagram that has Project Drawdown's solutions. You might be wondering, okay, where are these coming from? Well, the question of what kinds of solutions are actually impactful in the world in hand today is what started our organization, Project Drawdown. We're the world's leading resource for climate solutions. And back in 2017, we published a New York Times bestseller called Drawdown, and that our organization has really emerged as a leading resource for information and insight about climate solutions. We have a brand new publication that came out in March. I invite all of you to visit our website, drawdown.org, to download the free Drawdown Review. It's an incredible extension and up-to-date, more relevant and relatable and research group of content based on work that these fellows do. We have a worldwide network of research fellows who focus on all of the different solution areas that we know exist related to climate solutions. But you might be wondering, okay, you say this word drawdown, what in the world is drawdown? Well, our name actually comes from the scientific term drawdown. And drawdown indicates the future point in time when levels of those heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere stop climbing and start to steadily decline. This is really a critical turning point for life on Earth, and it's one that we need to reach as quickly, as safely, and as equitably as possible. So as Rotarians, we can work together to reach drawdown, but we have to work on all aspects of the climate equation. In the 2017 book, that leaned really heavily into rankings of different solutions. And while the 2020 Drawdown Review still has rankings, we really want folks to think about the solutions as this mosaic of solutions that all need to be implemented with urgency and with determination. So let's figure out where those solutions actually exist. Well, let's imagine that this gray rectangle is the amount of heat-trapping gases that humans put into the atmosphere every year. And those gases trap heat and thicken a blanket, a proverbial blanket around the planet that gets us warmer and warmer. And so here's where those heat-trapping gases come from. The current sources come from places like electricity production, food, agriculture and land use, industry, transportation, and buildings. So this could be kind of depressing, and this could be where we want to pull the covers over our head and not get out of bed. But thankfully, the story does not end there. Nature does an enormous favor and actually removes about 40% of those heat-trapping gases that we put into the atmosphere. This is nature all by itself doing what it does best. But about 60% of the heat-trapping gases are left behind, and that creates that thick blanket around the planet. So knowing where the heat-trapping gases come from, that's part of the rainbow of this diagram, and where they go can really help us identify the suite or the mosaic of climate solutions that we can implement to reach that moment in time drawdown. So I'd like to introduce you to our drawdown framework for climate solutions, and specifically the 3 S's. I like to keep things simple. I guess I could add another S. So the 3 S's, we're going to focus first on sources, reducing the sources of that heat-trapping gas pollution. We're going to focus on sinks, supporting and enhancing the sinks of carbon dioxide found in nature, and society, sources, sinks, and society, helping society achieve broader transformations. So these are the 3 interconnected areas for action, which we must pursue globally, simultaneously, and with determination. The 3 S's, sources, sinks, and society. So I'm going to provide you with an overview of climate solutions that we have in hand today to reach drawdown. But we're going to first start with electricity. So when we think about the emergence of electrical systems in the late 1800s, we know that society has created most of its electricity by using fossil fuels, burning coal, oil, and natural gas. And that locked up energy of long buried plants and animals is turned into electricity as carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere as a byproduct. What I want to show you for each of these solution areas today is what we call the bubble diagram. So this is an example of the electricity bubble diagram. And these are the subgroups of solutions we have in each of these spaces. So if we look at what are the solutions related to reducing the sources of electricity, there are solutions focused on shifting production. And you'll see some things that you might be familiar with there, things like onshore wind turbines, distributed solar photovoltaics, solar panels. You'll also see another bubble of solutions focused on enhancing electricity, or enhancing efficiency, excuse me. Things like insulating your home, things like low flow fixtures. And you'll see in the corner, we also know that we need to improve our electrical system. So we have shifting production, enhancing efficiency, and improving the system as the three major solution areas within electricity. I don't have time to go into all of these today, so what I want to do instead is highlight some of the great work that Rotarians are already working on the ground, so you have ways that you can get more involved in Rotary projects. So we're going to first focus on, we're going to start in Uganda, where access to power is expensive, dirty, and inconsistent if it's available at all. Frequent blackouts interrupt learning. Health centers are unable to keep vaccines on hand. And students with no access to power can't study after the sun sets. Enter All We Are. It's a nonprofit bringing sustainable energy solutions to communities in Uganda. Not only is this a climate solution through shifting production to renewables, this solution has co-benefits. And we heard Gavin talking about co-benefits earlier today. Co-benefits mean that it's not just a climate solution, it also decreases energy costs by up to 80%. It improves student performance and it helps communities thrive. So looking for those co-benefits is really a fabulous place to start implementing climate solutions. So in the past 5 years, the Solarize Uganda Now project has completed 32 LED solar installations at 26 Ugandan schools, 2 medical clinics, and a women's center, and installed 3 solar-powered wells. This work was done in partnership with the Raleigh Midtown Club of Rotary, the Rotary Club of Cincinnati, the Rotary Club of Kampala, and District 7710, 9211, and 6670, and others. And why in the world did this happen? Well, this is thanks to Nathan Thomas, the All We Are founder, president, former president, or he was a president rather, of the Rotary Club of Raleigh Midtown at age 23, and he's a future district governor in 2022. You might have read about him in the latest issue of the Rotarian magazine. If not, please go check it out. What an incredible story. And Nathan, we are so grateful, is involved with this, with All We Are. He founded it, and he is happy for any and all of you to contact him if you are interested in working on solutions specifically focused on electricity. So Nathan's information is on this slide, nathan@allweare.org. We're going to move on now to food, agriculture, and land use. So a huge climate solution is the ways in which we grow and use our food. Solutions in this sector are focused on addressing waste and diets, ecosystem protection, and better overall agricultural practices. Today, I want to focus on addressing food waste. So globally, 1/3 of the world's food is never eaten, which means that land and resources used and those heat-trapping gases emitted in producing the food were completely unnecessary. So food waste is an absolutely solvable problem. And it's a problem that can be solved through innovative partnerships and with the help of a hierarchy. So here's a hierarchy. This is the food waste recovery hierarchy. And we want to start at the very top and try to avoid getting to the bottom. Now, this hierarchy comes to us, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has a version of it, and this is adapted by Rob Anderson of Melbourne, Australia, and the Rotary Club there, when he realized that a number of Rotary projects already underway were focusing on food waste. So to help the community better understand how those various projects might fit together and why it's important to have a diverse spectrum of projects, Rob mapped them onto this hierarchy. So let's check it out. We start by reducing the sources of food waste in the first place. And there's already awareness programs out in the world, things like Save the Food and others, who are doing great work in this space. So you might be interested, or your club might be interested in, focusing on food waste source reduction. Or you might be interested in partnering with food charities where you can collect and distribute food and help feed hungry people. So after we reduce the sources, the next most important thing is that we feed hungry people. Another project working on that right now is Lunch Out of Landfills and the great work from Joe Richardson and his club on focusing specifically on schools. After we feed hungry people, we want to feed animals, and we can feed animals through partnerships with supermarkets and local farms and farmers markets. And if the food can't be eaten by people or animals. We can explore ways to use food waste through industrial uses. We can also compost the food through curbside community composting programs. If you don't have one in your community, maybe that's something you could work towards. And as a very last resort, we send food waste to landfills. There are so many ways to reduce food waste. And the solutions not only reduce those harmful heat trapping gases, they also have the co-benefits of feeding others as well. So to join SREG's Food Waste Solutions Task Force, please reach out to Rob Anderson, and he is at robanderson@sreg.org. He will be looking forward to hearing from you and reducing food waste alongside you. So moving on to something that might seem really foreign, we're going to focus on industry. And when we think of industry, we might think of concrete or computers, cars and clothing, and that's the sector that makes them all. And we might feel like we're really disconnected from that sector. But this is actually not only a sector for large multinational companies. And in this sector, we actually have solutions related to how we use waste, and solutions focused on things like composting and recycling and addressing refrigerants that live in old refrigerators and air conditioners. So unfortunately, the refrigerants, they're called CFCs, HCFCs, or with a trademark example, Freon. They are really potent heat trapping gases. And it makes sense, right? Because what we need them to do when they're in air conditioners or when they're in refrigerators is we need them to trap the heat so that our food stays cold or so that our spaces stay cold. But when those gases are released, so when we dispose of the refrigerators or the air conditioners improperly, or when they leak, those heat trapping gases go into our atmosphere, and unfortunately they keep doing their job, and they are really good heat trapping gases. And by really good, I mean pretty bad at trapping heat. So we've got those heat trapping gases, and you might be wondering, well, what in the world can we do with those? Well, let me tell you a little story. These refrigerants are found all over the world. And several years ago, City Waste Recycling in Accra, Ghana, in West Africa, they learned of a large cache of these unused canisters of refrigerants that if they were released into the atmosphere, they would hold the same heat as the carbon dioxide emissions of burning 16 million gallons of gasoline. That's a lot of gasoline. The refrigerants can be incinerated in special kilns, which break the molecules into a benign mixture where they no longer trap heat. But there are no disposal facilities in all of West Africa. So the problem becomes financial. At the same time, a startup company from Chicago called Tradewater was developing a business based on being able to sell these heat trapping gas credits, also known as carbon credits, on carbon markets. Tradewater partnered with City Waste Recycling to sell those carbon credits on the voluntary market, and they just needed a buyer. And thankfully, they found a buyer in Intuit, the maker of TurboTax and QuickBooks products and many other things. So refrigerant management, you might be wondering, well, if they make software, if Intuit makes software, why did they care? Well, they actually read Drawdown. They read our work from Project Drawdown, and they realized that refrigerants have incredible heat trapping potential, and by reducing refrigerant release into the atmosphere, that is an incredible drawdown solution. So in addition to them buying those offsets, that helped spur Tradewater and City Waste Recycling in Ghana. They were able to sweep that whole area from refrigerants. So this is where you come in. You might be wondering, well, I don't work for Intuit, I don't work at Tradewater, but here is what is so powerful about Rotary. As Rotarians, your global distribution makes you the perfect group to work with on this solution. You can find and fetch feral Freon through a new SREG project. Clary Nolet is leading a project right now with an ultimate goal of creating and selling CFC destruction credits to 1 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. That is an incredible drawdown solution. So please, please reach out to Clary to learn how you can get involved in your local community, because you might be surprised to know that there are actually caches of these CFCs and HCFCs in your community, and they just need to be collected and transported, not in your personal vehicle, but they need to be transported to these kilns so that they can become benign. So please reach out to Clary, and you can be a huge part of the solution with Climate Solutions. here are some solutions, or here are some sectors that don't yet have Rotary projects, but we know that they are really impactful solutions when it comes to reaching drawdown. So this might spark some ideas for what your club could do in the future. So we know that mobility has played a critical and complex role in shaping society, and the demand for it is only growing. However, most of the energy driving mobility has been generated by burning gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. So our transportation solutions include shifting to alternatives, enhancing efficiency, and electrifying vehicles. Bicycles, as you all likely know, are a great alternative in many places to cars and fossil fuel transport, especially in cities. And infrastructure is essential for supporting safe and abundant bicycle use, which then cuts emissions. But sometimes infrastructure is put into place without considering the most vulnerable members of our communities. So I want to go to Detroit, where Detroit is implementing adaptive bike sharing into their bike share infrastructure. So they have a single pickup and drop-off point. They keep it staffed, which allows people to leave behind their wheelchair or their mobility device, picking it up after the trip. These programs have seen a wide range of users, including people with disabilities, caregivers, riders not comfortable on two-wheeled bikes, riders with injury or illness, and those just interested in trying adaptive cycling. So we know that making bike share accessible will create more robust infrastructure and support for cycling investments in cities. We also know it will increase accessibility for people with different ability levels and potentially improve the health outcomes of residents. All those benefits while reducing those heat trapping emissions from transportation. Buildings are another major driver of emissions. Some stem from the materials that comprise buildings and the process of construction, renovation, or demolition, what's known as embodied carbon. But many more emissions are the result of ongoing use, and that's where we focus on enhancing energy efficiency. Buffalo, New York is a city filled with old houses that challenge their residents with high heating costs that are generated by long and demanding winters. It's not unusual for a heating bill to come at or higher the cost of rent. Hundreds of area residents are working with an organization called Push Buffalo, People United for Sustainable Housing, in efforts to weatherproof houses, install solar energy systems, and work together to gain climate resilience. By enhancing building efficiency, uplifting residents, and building partnerships, communities can be powerful leaders in enhancing health equity and climate resilience. So that's wrapping up the sources. Now let's focus on supporting sinks. So moving from land specifically is a critical component of the climate system, actively engaged in the flows of carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen, which are essential building blocks for life. Plants and healthy ecosystems have an incredible capacity to absorb carbon through photosynthesis and store it in living biomass. So our solutions here rely on shifting agricultural practices, protecting and restoring ecosystems, using degraded land, and addressing waste and diets. We're going to focus on shifting agricultural practices, and I'm going to take you to the edge of Bluffton, Georgia, one of the poorest counties in the United States. Will Harris and his family have turned white oak pastures into one of the largest pasture-raised livestock operations in the entire country. It's a grand experiment in the deindustrialization of agriculture. White oak pastures supports 110 employees, but those employees don't feed animals. They feed the microbes in the soil. The microbes feed the soil feeds the plants, and the plants feed the animals, and they breed and they grow, and the animals are turned into meat and they're sold for money, and that keeps the whole system going. The health of the soil is connected to the health of the community. And as the healthy soil sequesters the carbon, it acts as an important land-based sink, a critical climate solution. The last sink we're going to talk about today is our coastal and ocean sinks, where the sea and the air meet. The oceans absorb and redistribute heat and carbon, which unfortunately are both rising due to the glut of emissions in the atmosphere. There's an ambitious wetlands restoration project underway on Delaware Bay in the United States, where scientists are using innovative methods to revive a badly damaged salt marsh. In the 1980s, Prime Hook Salt Marsh was converted into a freshwater impoundment system to attract more ducks and geese and other birds for hunters and bird watchers. This project is now a model for restoring vital wetlands worldwide by taking design cues from nature to create a resilient ecosystem, an increasingly vital task as climate change threatens coastlines with rising sea levels and stronger storms. Coastal wetlands, when preserved or restored, reduce flooding and erosion better than hard infrastructure like seawalls and levees, and they sequester carbon more efficiently than woodlands. So moving from reducing sources, supporting sinks, we're now moving into improving society. And those are solutions that we should implement anyway, even if climate change wasn't an issue. By developing a more equitable society, we can actually help with climate change. Access to high quality voluntary reproductive health care and to high quality inclusive education are fundamental human rights and cornerstones of gender equality. In more indirect ways, making strides in health and education can also benefit the climate. One way that communities and Rotary clubs have engaged people in climate action is through the Drawdown Eco Challenge. It's a fun and social way to take measurable action on climate. The Drawdown Eco Challenge runs year-round. You can create teams, track your progress, all while putting a variety of climate solutions into place. Because after all, we all have a role to play in implementing climate solutions. If we do all of these things, we reduce sources by implementing solutions focused on electricity, food, agriculture and land use, industry, transportation and buildings. If we support sinks on land and in the ocean and improve society through healthcare and education, we can actually reach drawdown. I've shared a few climate solution stories with you today, and you have many of your own climate solution stories already underway in your communities. So what's next? What do you want to reach towards? The reality of intervening in a complex system is that no one person can do it all. And we all have an opening to show up as problem solvers and change agents and contribute in significant ways, even when we feel small. So I'm going to end by asking you the same question we started with. What comes to mind when you think about climate change and global warming? Go ahead and put some answers in the chat box, please. And Michael, I would love it if you could let me know what people are saying now.
Great. Elizabeth, thank you. This is a wonderful presentation. You know, we're so happy with the relationship that ESRAG and Rotary is developing with Project Drawdown. We think it will bode well for the future. You have very practical ideas that will be useful to clubs on electricity, food waste, industries. My answer has simply changed. I want to support sinks, right, going forward. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thanks so much.